Hello and welcome to the Worn and Wound podcast. My name is Zach Kazan. I'm the managing editor at Worn and Wound, joined today by Devin Pennypacker, media manager at Worn and Wound. Devin, how's it going?
Zach, I am doing phenomenal. We just got back from some pretty big trips. We had some really amazing bonding time at a chicken shack in London, and I'm excited to just talk about our food.
Yeah, I don't have like that. I didn't have that on my outline for the pod today, but I'm always happy to talk about food eaten on a work-related trip. Devin, you're referring, of course, to our little trip to British Watchmakers Day, London, England. This is the second annual British Watchmakers Day. Our first time at the event. Zach Weiss and Blake Mallon went last year, and we went this year. And I think, we'll have someone from the team go back, year after year. I think. I mean, that's sort of what I'd like to do because it's a really fun event, and we're going to talk about everything we saw and did on our little trip to England. That's what this show will be about. We'll also maybe touch on a couple of new releases, kind of like pre-Watches and Wonders releases from some big brands.
Yeah.
And before that, we'll do a wrist check because we always do on the Worn and Wound podcast. It's a tradition. What are you wearing today?
Oh, that is a good question. I actually, I'll admit, I think we all, when we do wrist checks, like we all wear something for the podcast that we want to talk about. I found myself when I got back from London just kind of taking off the Planet Ocean and grabbing the first watch that caught my eye, and that happened to be the Circula Pro Trail, the cream dial with the lume kind of outer ring on the bracelet. Just a watch that I really enjoy, one that I haven't worn in quite some time, and when I saw it, I was just like, you know what, I want a little bit of color. I want, even though it's cream, it's not the most colorful.
It's not the most colorful. It's a hint. It's a suggestion of color.
Vibrant for my wardrobe. We'll put it that way. So, but just a solid watch and one. Again, I haven't worn it for quite some time, so I just kind of figured it was due for some wrist time.
Yeah, Circular they make a really nice watch. So that's that's a good one. I actually don't necessarily agree that we pick a watch that we want to talk about. Like for me, it's just it's really just authentically the watch I happen to be wearing. And
all right. You're a shill for the podcast. We know.
Listen, I'm a shill for my authentic watch selection. But I'm wearing my Zeitwinkel today. Yeah. Whatever.
Enough with the British. Bring in the German.
They're Swiss. Swiss. Yeah. So often mistaken for German because of the name,
and the silver.
Yeah. And the silver, the German silver. Yes, you're right. Of course, yeah. All right. Jet lag is still a factor.
I guess, yeah. You can see the bags under my eyes if you are watching the little social clip that we put up.
Yeah, please don't do that. If you see the social clip, just like burned right through it. Just swipe to the next thing. It's probably not good for our social media, but whatever. Just this one won't really harm us. All right, wrist check out of the way. Before we get into British Watchmakers Day stuff, Devin, I wanted to talk to you about a couple of new releases. Mostly what I wanted to talk to you about was the new releases from Omega, namely these new Planet Ocean world timers.
Yeah.
I feel like Omega releases are kind of I don't know. They're always kind of like they're sort of big. They're splashy. The watches themselves are more iterative oftentimes than than like the splashiness would make you think. You mentioned your Planet Ocean just a minute ago. You're our resident Planet Ocean guy, whether you like it or not. What is your immediate take on these watches?
Gross.
Okay.
No, I've said it many times. I don't think the modern Planet Ocean wears nearly as well as the old one does. I think that the modern styling, it's definitely it's not bad. I just kind of prefer the older styling a little bit more. But to put the world timer dial on this watch in particular, to me, just kind of feels, and I said this in our Slack group as well, it feels like an exercise in what do I have laying around that I can fit together.
You did say that. I thought that was a pretty apt, kind of an analysis there.
I think like the teal and black color scheme is pretty cool, but I'll argue that we've seen other brands do it better. Namely like IWC. I think that their kind of Mercedes partnership works out really well. And I don't know. I look at this watch and I don't quite know who it's going to be for. It's huge. It's hard to read.
It's almost 20 millimeters thick.
Yeah, it's a monster.
Like it's literally like 18 or 19 millimeters thick.
Right. And it is honestly like the legibility is not great. So if you want a dive watch that has multiple time zone functionality or visuals, I guess, there are better options out there. And it's kind of a bummer because, again, it could have been a cool, cool iteration on the Planet Ocean. But this is just, to me, kind of a big swing and a miss.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, these watches are definitely, you talk about who are they for? They're definitely not for me. Like, they're just like an aggressive style of sports watch that is like just not my cup of tea these days. I don't hate the teal colorway.
Sure.
I think the other one is just like not good. Like, to me,
very hard to read.
Yeah, very hard to read, very bland. You mentioned IWC. You know, IWC has like a really interesting world timer where the bezel kind of like changes the city view that you have. So it's like
it's interactive almost.
Yeah, it's interactive, and like it's a genuinely different kind of way to approach a world timer.
Mm-hmm.
And Omega just keeps kind of like throwing this movement at various watches in their Seamaster collection. Like this watch exists in the Aquaterra collection, right. And I think in the standard Seamaster collection as well. So it's like it's just kind of it's just iterative, and I think it's sort of a that's sort of like where we're at, like in the watch industry right now, is like most of the large brands are kind of in like an iterative mode with their new releases, at least to this point in the year.
Yeah, especially, I mean, it's a bummer too. When you look at Omega, I think that they can be, for a lot of people, they're hit and miss. You know, obviously they lean into styling pretty heavily. We're coming off of the gold bronze Seamaster that just dropped a little while ago, and then right before that was the teal Aquaterra. Mm-hmm. I think that apart from the Seamaster, if you look back at that teal Aquaterra, again, I think it has a bit of a problem with legibility. And Omega is supposed to be kind of a refined tool watch that you can grab and go, take on adventures, beat it up a little bit, not care as much. You know, they're trying to offer you a value proposition, but really lean into the tool ethos in their Seamaster line. Obviously, not talking about the Constellation and stuff. And with these modern offerings that we're getting, I think are actually leaning away from what that line is supposed to be. And it's just not exactly where I want them to go with it.
Yeah. So like, what are they then? Like,
I think they're just red carpet watches.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, like they're meant to be spotted and noticed and not necessarily used. There was an article, I honestly can't remember who wrote this. This was a little while ago now, but someone did kind of a watch spotting, but was trying to figure out how many of them are actually set to the correct time. And it's shockingly few. Most people just kind of throw it on their wrist, or they work with a designer who puts it in the outfit. And it's not necessarily organic. And I think that that's kind of where this is. Luckily with these watches, it doesn't matter if you set it to the right time because you won't be able to tell anyway.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see if we see these giant Seamaster world timers on a red carpet. Like that would seem to be like that'd be like a mismatch with like formal attire, I think. But
we'll see it as a soccer match or or like a tennis match. Someone will be wearing it. Tom Holland will be wearing it in the audience at a tennis match somewhere. Just make sure you don't hit Zendaya with it because that'll leave a mark.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just strange. I'm not quite sure who the audience is for this particular piece.
Yeah. It's a little strange. We'll have something on the website on this watch, I think, by the time this podcast airs. So we'll point to that in the show notes. The other watch I wanted to talk to you about, Devin, I don't know if you had a chance to see it. It's the new watch from Hamilton. This is not iterative. This is, I think, a genuinely kind of like new thing. That whether it's to your taste or not, I think is like kind of interesting to talk about. It's their new, it's part of their Bolton line technically, but it's a limited edition for the Death Stranding 2 video game. Are you a gamer, Devin?
I am. My cultural recommendation on the last podcast I was on was a video game.
Of course, yeah. How could I forget?
How dare you?
I'm not a gamer.
Sure.
So like Death Stranding means like very little to me. But I had a chance to see this watch at a Hamilton preview event earlier this year. They were very secretive about it, and they were very they're very proud of it, and they were very kind of like intent on making sure that like this watch makes the biggest splash possible once it's released. And the embargo's released now. The watch will actually be available later this summer when the game itself is available.
Yeah.
I wanted to just see, Devin, given that you're since you're a gamer and I'm not, what are your thoughts on this watch, and also the idea of Hamilton kind of like leaning into gaming culture in the same way, very consciously, in the same way that they've leaned into like movie culture over the past like several decades?
Sure.
Really, like they're very well known as being kind of like a watch that's associated with with the silver screen, and they're in all sorts of movies, and they're very proud of that. And this is like, I was told, like very specifically, like another branch of that. They're really looking at like entertainment in general and not just movies as sort of like the future.
Good. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that gamers are getting their due. To be honest, it's a huge audience out there that is largely untapped for opportunities like this. I also think too that because movies are the way that they are, I think about so if you're familiar with video games, you might know the show The Game Awards, which is like the Oscars for video games. But the whole like running hashtag for the Game Awards is hashtag F the Oscars. Because the Oscars is very polished and very pomp and circumstance, and everyone has to be perfect. And then you go to the Game Awards and it's very much like a for the people, by the people show. And I think that attitude actually translates into collaborative watches and just kind of putting branding into the different products. So if you look at Hamilton's creation for the Dune 2 movie, they did the 2 limited editions. I think they're terrible. I was really excited for them. I thought that they were going to look more like movie props. And they came out and they honestly, I think, just looked really cheap. I think they were poorly done. I think that there was probably a lot of input from Hollywood execs around the Dune movie because it's a huge property and a huge franchise and yada yada. Whereas you have video game people who are just half the time happy to be included. So I look at this new Death Stranding limited edition from Hamilton, and it doesn't say Death Stranding on the dial. It doesn't scream video game. It doesn't look like some sort of fantasy watch. It looks like a really cool watch that you could probably put in a whole bunch of different things and it would work. But it really just kind of pulls the essence of the game, the kind of like dark, drippy, atmospheric landscape that the game is set in, and puts it into a pretty unique looking watch.
Yeah, I was really impressed with it as like a piece of kind of like experimental watchmaking and it's kind of like moving the goal line a little bit in terms of design. Like this is not a cookie cutter design.
No.
The thing that I'm sometimes critical of like large brands of is like not taking chances, not taking big swings. And this, like whether you think it's successful or not, is inarguably like a very big swing. I happen to like it quite a bit. Like the thought that I initially had is like, this is kind of like Urworky almost, like in the way that it's sort of like in the shape, and also like it has 7 sapphire crystals on the top side, which is just a very cool thing. Manase is the only other brand I can think of, Japanese brand, that does anything like even remotely similar to that. And if you talk to them, they've been at windups in the past, and like they'll tell you how difficult the manufacturing is. To get those crystals, exactly, the right. So like it's very tough, to make those custom crystals. And obviously like Hamilton has the resources of the Swatch Group behind them. So if anyone can do it, it's Hamilton, but still not straightforward.
No.
So there's real challenge there. It's also just like a very kind of like nicely made thing. It wears much better than you would expect a watch of its size to. When they pulled it out of the box, my initial thought was, well, this is going to be chunky. Like this is going to be kind of hard to wear because it just like it looks big. But it's actually like very ergonomic and like has some like thoughtful curves to the case that make it wear a lot easier than you'd expect. It's also like $1,500, I think, which like to me seems like a very fair price for something that's this kind of like outside the box for Hamilton. So I'm a pretty big fan of it. I like it quite a bit. I'm interested to see. They're really hoping for a big crossover hit. They're really hoping that like the gaming community like takes this watch seriously, and like people who are into gaming buy this watch. I guess time will tell on whether or not that happens. We'll see later this year.
I hope so.
But I think there's like, just from sort of like the comments I see on like Instagram posts and whatnot, it seems like watch people like this watch too. Like it's not going over like those Dune watches did, which were kind of like, universally kind of a seen as a letdown by many.
Well, I think the hard thing too is like with the Dune watches. To be clear with those, there was a movie prop of a wrist-worn device in those movies that activated their shields and whatever. We don't have to get too in the weeds with that. And Hamilton kind of showed
Let's get really in the weeds. let's get really into the weeds of Dune on this.
Yeah, you guys are going to love this. We're going to talk all about sandworms for the next hour and a half. But anyway, they showed those wrist-worn devices and kind of used that as the teaser for the watches. And then the watches came out and they looked literally nothing like those. And then they had like kind of weird gimmicky light up portions that kind of looked a little bit on the cheaper side, and the price point was really high. And the only thing I can really say positive about those watches is that the box they came in was really cool. And that's a bummer. But then you look at this watch and it's interesting because you have someone like myself who is a gamer who played Death Stranding 1, who is excited for Death Stranding 2, and typically I don't like crossover products, but I really like this watch. And then you have you who has not played Death Stranding 1, doesn't know much about the game at all, and still likes the watch. So I think they found a way to make a more universally loved product, or at least interesting product, without making it feel weird, gimmicky, forced, shoved together. And I can personally see, like, Hideo Kojima is the director of the video game. I could see him wearing this watch because he has kind of that futuristic, cutting-edge, monochromatic look. And then Norman Reedus, who's the leading actor for the video game, I could see him wearing this on his motorcycle with a bunch of leather cuffs and stuff like that. So it feels authentic, but still, again, interesting for more than just one audience.
Yeah, I mean, I think what it boils down to is they just made a cool watch. Like they just they had a good idea and they executed it really well. Yeah. And it's I mean, I think it's successful. So so we'll have a lot more on this watch, kind of closer to when it's released later this spring, summer. I'd like to talk to Vivian, the CEO at Hamilton, kind of about the like the concept behind it and how it all came together. It's a pretty interesting story that he shared some of the details with me when I saw him earlier this year. So we'll see if we can get an interview going with him or someone else at Hamilton cool. behind the design of this piece. But definitely something to look out for. I think interesting and notable instance of a big brand doing something like genuinely like pretty exciting. I'm often critical of these brands for like playing it very safe. So I want to make sure that we know when a brand doesn't, when they take a big risk. I think that's important to do. So
yeah, very cool piece. Honestly, one that I would like to get on wrist at some point, just to try it for myself because I'm very interested in it.
I have a feeling you'll have your chance maybe relatively soon.
I think a premonition.
Maybe, yeah. Let's shift gears to British Watchmakers Day, Devin. So this was our first year attending British Watchmakers Day, which is the kind of like key event for the British Watch and Clockmakers Alliance, which was founded a few years ago as a kind of like a trade union for these like newer, British based, UK based watch brands that kind of like support each other, develop ideas together and so forth. We've seen a bunch of, interesting collaborations come out of this already. And like the show is like the real sort of like the crown jewel of the Alliance. Like I said, Zach and Blake went last year. They had a great time. We went this year. Just like big picture, Devin, what were your overall kind of like thoughts on the event itself?
Yeah, I think immediately everyone's going to ask us personally to compare it to the wind-up watch fairs. Obviously, it's a similar kind of not vibe because it's very different. We'll get into that in a little bit here, but obviously kind of a similar concept. But overall, I think it was just a fantastic show. I think there was a lot of enthusiasm and excitement around it, especially the special editions and limited editions, people fighting to get in line for the gimlet. There were a lot of things going into the show that I questioned, the 2 different time slots and the venue and the brands that were going to be there and all the special editions, but it all worked really, really well. Yeah. And there were a lot of brands that did meetups before, did meetups afterwards. So it really became this great moment for the whole community at large to come together. And What interested me too is I think we saw a lot of media coverage from outside of the UK at the event. We met up with a bunch of people and spoke to them. So it's getting a lot of traction, and I think rightfully so.
Yeah, you mentioned the kind of like events before and after the show. We were involved in one of those events. We hosted a meetup with Arken the night before the show. I don't know how many. I wasn't counting, people at the door. I don't know how many people actually showed up, but seems like a pretty good crowd in a pretty, a tidy area there in this pub that we were at. And it was just great to see people come out for Arken, and frankly, and for us too. It was very rewarding, and I felt very, very welcomed by this community of British watch enthusiasts. Yeah, I think the setup of the show, like from a distance, kind of does feel like a wind up. It's in a big hall. There's a bunch of brands that exhibit at their individual booths. They're kind of like different sizes depending on like the size of the brand to a certain extent. But it's when you zoom in, there are these little differences, and like the big difference I think is that the British Watchmakers Day event is a paid event. You have to pay to get into one of two sessions, and of course that's because they're trying to raise money for the alliance.
Yeah,
which I think is they seemed happy to do. The show sold out quite early. In fact, I heard there were people scalping tickets outside the venue, like it was
wow,
like a Kiss show in the late 70s or something. So
you couldn't have gone with a British brand. You couldn't have picked like the Who.
I guess, yeah. Oh, yeah,
Come on,
sure.
Zach.
Like the Who during the same time.
There we go.
I don't know why I said Kiss. I'm not even a Kiss fan.
Horrible.
It's just very strange. Very strange reference. We published an article on our favorite watches of the show, kind of focusing on limited editions because brands are really incentivized to create limited editions for the show because the funds raised through the sales go back to the alliance, and people come out and pay money, again for tickets to see these limited editions and have a chance to buy them. I thought we could kind of just like go through that list and maybe talk about also some of the other watches that like didn't quite make the cut, watches that weren't limited editions that we had a chance to see, perhaps. Why don't you get us started, Devin? What was your favorite watch of British Watchmakers Day?
I'll throw a little twist on there. I'm not going to mention any of the watches that I talked about in that article. So if you want to know what my top three,
you do your thing, Devin.
I'm laying the road here so people can actually go read the article. But also like why rehash content? Let's talk about something new. I'll leave those three to the article, and instead I'll kick this one off with let's see here. I mean, there were a lot of great watches there, honestly, and a lot that really kind of caught my eye. But one that I'm still thinking about today is, of course, the Gimlet. 200 units available to buy, 200 units sold, and everyone was happy to queue up. Brits love to queue, as I was told. Everyone was happy to sit in line in the middle of the show and block the whole central aisle of booths for the first 30 minutes of the show and buy their Gimlet. Just a lot of great. Honestly, the advertising was really smart. It was a lot of fun. It was very engaging. The watch is one that I still think about a lot. I'll be honest, when I first saw the press release, to me, it felt like the two brands meshed together in a way that I didn't quite find organic. And then the more I dove into the story and the more I put the watch on and I actually got to spend a little bit of time with it, the more I fell in love with that watch. And I kind of wish I had queued up as well. Just such a neat, unique piece that everyone seemed just so happy to be there to buy.
Yeah, it was kind of like unquestionably like the big hit watch of the show. It was hard to ignore that giant line of British watch enthusiasts waiting to buy their Gimlet. It sold out. They sold I guess half of them in the first half of the show, and then half of them in the afternoon. Event. But yeah, no, very cool release, and cool to see Nicholas and Richard kind of team up. Obviously they've known each other for a long time. They kind of like run in the same circles in the British watchmaking community. It seems like a natural sort of natural pairing, I think, in a lot of ways, but also like a strange pairing. Like they're both kind of like really, really good at like the things that they do, in terms of like their own like kind of like branding and the watches that they make, and like this seems like the obvious sort of like connection point, a watch in like a Fierce Brunswick style case with a dial that has this like sort of like intense lume effect, and using like those sapphire discs that Richard is so good at kind of implementing.
Yeah, very cool. Hopefully the first of many cocktail watches between the two brands. I would love for them to do a Negroni next and do the same Brunswick case, Negroni dial. I'll fight to be in line for that one. I don't care if I'm sent to London next year or not. I will be in line to buy the Negroni at the next British Watchmakers Day if it's there.
Are you a Negroni guy? Are you one
I
of
am.
these people?
Yeah, I am. But I like to change the alcohol in it. I'll go for gin or whiskey or mezcal. I think it's a fun cocktail to play with, and you can really change the profile depending on what kind of vermouth or Campari you use.
It always seemed very kind of strange and random to me that the Negroni became like the chosen cocktail of watch enthusiasts and watch collectors. Nothing wrong with it. Like, it's a perfectly fine cocktail, but like, I mean, someday there's an article to be written about like the genesis of how that became like a thing and why it's endured.
Probably not a pleasant story. It's probably some sort of snobbery and elitism involved in it, but I like a cocktail.
I mean, I like a cocktail myself. I just there's almost always a better option than a Negroni. Is sort of my.
How dare you?
Listen, you have your hot takes. I have mine.
That's true.
So,
it's true.
I'm going to talk about a brand that I talked about in my in the written piece, of course, that we'll link to in the show notes, that I think had like a really good British Watchmakers Day. But I won't talk about like the watch specifically that I mentioned in that piece, the limited edition that they put out. But Isotope, I thought it just showed me a lot of really cool stuff. Jose from Isotope, just a really, really great guy. I always enjoy my run-ins with him at Wind Up, whenever I get a chance to see him. And if you know anything about Isotope and like kind of Jose's, like the projects he's working on, he's been working on a bunch of things for quite some time. And he had several watches that are kind of like in the final stages, like in the production version, finally, after like years of development, literally. And one of those was the Moonshot chronograph, which is a watch that like I think people have been waiting for like literally like 2 or 3 years at this point, like since he first started teasing it.
I got a prototype of that like 2 years ago at that point, and it was like one of the first 3 that he made. And he's still, I mean, if you look at it, it's hard to manufacture. That is a tough watch to make, so it's going to take some time.
Yeah, there's a lot of little kind of details have to be thought out, in that watch, because of the unique way that like the subdials are read through these little like discs that rotate. Obviously, like the discs have a different weight than a hand would, and it's like that presents like a unique challenge on the movement. It's just it's like he's opening himself up to like all these challenges that you just don't have if you make a watch in a traditional way. So working through those is and it is interesting. So it's really cool to see the Moonshot kind of like in its final form, after so much time. And he also had like a bunch of, I don't have the names of the watches in front of me, unfortunately, but like just like newer versions of watches he's been working on. He had this one that's like a smaller case. It's not the Mercury case. It's a different style of case with like this large arch through the middle of it. The case band is just like, it almost looks like the St. Louis arch or something. It's like it's the Gateway arch. It's like it's really dramatic, and the dial has this kind of like hobnail effect, and it's extended to like the bezel in the case as well. It was a really cool, really impressive thing. And then of course the limited edition for the show was this marquetry dial, Mercury, which is a 37 millimeter kind of like retro futuristic dress watch. I just love like the craft behind this and the creativity behind the marquetry dial. He works with, I should say, an artisan based in France who specializes in marquetry that's executed with these like straws, basically, these like colored straws. So this was just a very cool thing. The watch looked great. I believe they were all spoken for at the show. He had another limited edition that unfortunately didn't arrive in time for the show, which is a Kazan dial, kind of inspired by the Union Jack flag, as the micromarquetry one was. I'm sure that also was impressive in person. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to see that, but I was just really blown away with like this everything that like kind of Isotope has accomplished. It seems like they've reached a point where a lot of their ideas, a lot of Jose's ideas, are finally kind of like coming to fruition in like a really satisfying way.
Yeah. I mean, I have a sneaky suspicion that he has a whole lot more that we haven't seen yet.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
He's very good about it. I do want to call out, too, it was Sophie Scott-Lewis who did the art behind the dial for Isotope there. So a designer that I think a lot of us should be familiar with at this point.
Yeah.
But I'll be honest, I didn't really get a chance to go up to the Isotope table because there was always people surrounding Jose. I didn't even get to say hello to Jose until like the very end of the show because he was just constantly talking to people, constantly showing off the watches, pulling things out. Just a tough booth to get up to, but that's great. I love that. And always just a fun display that they put on. They can have the simplest table in front of them, but the watches make it come to life, which is pretty cool.
For sure. All right, what's another watch that you wanted to call out?
All right, I'm going to call out another weird one then. I'm going to talk about the Schofield watches. There were 3 on his table. Brick of watches, like huge watches. They sit off the wrist pretty high, but when you start to look at the details of these watches, they are wild. Interesting case material, interesting just little details that make absolutely no sense. Really strange displays. And when you start talking to the guy behind it, you start to understand the mind behind these watches and kind of where they come from. I walked up to the table and I looked at Giles in the face and I was like, okay, sell me these watches. What is the pitch behind these watches? Because they're very unique. And he looked me in the eyes and he goes, if you found an unexploded ordnance out in the woods, would you keep it or turn it in? And I said, I'd probably keep it, I guess. And he goes, okay, cool. I can tell you about the watches. And that wasn't even part of the story. So that just goes to show like he's having fun. He's really putting himself into the watches. And it's down to the strangest details. See, there's a copper tube around the screw inside of the lug. There's no reason to do that apart from the fact that it looks cool. And he does it. So just very, very interesting pieces. Ones that we talk a lot about, where did the inspiration come from? I still don't know where the inspiration came from for these watches. They're just so unique and just a lot of fun.
Yeah, the Schofield stuff is very cool. I had I'd never actually seen a Schofield watch in person prior to this event, so it was just a real treat to kind of see not just the limited edition, but also a bunch of other watches that he brought, to display. Really interesting stuff. Very very niche, like really well made watches that are like. They're notably like quite expensive, and I think that when like we write about these watches on the website or when like you see conversation around them on Instagram or whatever, there's always those people who are like, why is this watch like whatever price he's asking for with like this movement that's like so.
I made that comment before I saw it.
Yeah, but like now that you've seen it, like you see like where the money goes, right? Like it's like,
mind blowing.
There's no other watch that's made like this. It's a very cool thing.
Not even close. This is truly it's a piece of art put into watch form. So I just very very impressed with the whole construction of it, and honestly, a watch that you could spend hours just poring over the details with a loop and never get bored. Yeah,
I also love that like his booth was situated like directly across from Roger W. Smith. I just thought that was really, that's the sort of thing that happens at wind-ups and also at British Watchmakers Day. You have these brands that are like at just like, different end, not just like even different ends of the spectrum, just like have totally different ideas about watchmaking.
Yeah.
And, you see them kind of like, in conversation with one another almost just because of their proximity to one another. And that just really jumped out at me with Schofield. It's like, from where like from where you were standing at the Schofield table, you're just looking right at Roger W. Smith.
Yeah,
literally like looking at Roger W. Smith. So
the least traditional watchmaker across from one of the most traditional watchmakers. And you want to talk about a watch box? Schofield makes a pretty cool watch box.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, everything they do is just very. Just like very kind of like intensely well thought out. Really cool stuff. Another one I really liked that I didn't include in the in our wrap up is the Pinion Neutron Violet. This is another watch that another brand that like I just haven't had a ton of exposure to. I have seen Pinions in person, but I don't think they've ever come to a windup that I can recall. And you just don't see them like very, very often. At least, in my circles anyway. And so his limited edition for the show was this like purple like field watch essentially, and it's just a really cool color, really nicely made, wears really well. Had a chance to chat with him, for a little bit. Very nice guy. He's, the opinion's been around for a little bit. Like they've got like a dedicated, fan base, I think, and like they really know their customer, and they have a cool collection. And I really enjoyed my time at the Pinion table. Did you get a chance to check that one out?
Yeah, I actually really liked it. This is one going into British Watchmakers Day that I was really excited to go see because purple is my favorite color. And it's one that you don't see executed, at least not the way I want it to be executed, a lot in watches. And so when I saw the ultraviolet, I was like, I have to go put that on. I have to go take a look at it. And it didn't disappoint. I guess the only slight knock I'll give against British Watchmakers Day is that it's really hard to capture photos in their hall because the big glass roof has a bunch of horizontal supports going across.
Yeah.
So you get these like striped reflections on all the crystals, and that was no exception here. So all my photos of this watch are not doing the watch justice at all, but I really liked it. It was really well made. It's a good blend of like traditional and kind of modern in your face. And again, just a cool artist collaboration that they did to try to celebrate British Watchmakers Day and go against the traditional coloring. We saw a lot of blue, white, and red, and this is obviously a mix of all three, I guess.
Yeah, purple I think has a royal connotation in England. It's the Jubilee color. I think we've seen other brands do purple watches, for special occasions. But yeah, it's it's a color that's kind of like having a moment. Like there's certainly a bunch of purple watches. You wrote about a purple Tag Carrera recently. Yeah, but this one's very good. It's a very, very nice piece. And I enjoyed, like I said, checking out that Pinion and others at British Watchmakers Day.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's next for you, Devin?
That's a good question. I really liked the Farer, but it's a watch I feel like I've seen before. They had their Aurora special edition at the show, and it had kind of that like guilloche copper dial. So that was a pretty cool one. But I also, every time I go to the Farer booth, I honestly spend time looking at all of their watches equally because they're all just kind of similar but kind of crazy different at the same time. So the Aurora I tried on, I liked it, but I kind of ultimately walked away from it pretty quickly too and spent more time with the Stanhope collection because I just genuinely love that collection from them. I miss the old number 1, but the Stanhope 2 is pretty great as well. But right behind them was the Arken booth as well.
Yeah.
And now, yes, we hosted a meetup with Ken. Yes, his brash personality is intoxicating to say the least.
Brash personality, is that how you would refer to it? That's
I think he would agree.
Brash.
Yeah,
I guess. I mean, I think of him as just like a genuinely like nice guy. But,
yeah, that's true.
I never got on his bad side, so
I'm trying really hard, but he doesn't let that happen often. But no, I enjoyed. This is my first time like spending time with multiple Arkens. I've played with Kat. Kat has an Arken model. I played with hers. Played with other friends who have them, but I haven't had a chance to like really go hands on with multiple models. And so at our meetup, I got to have hands on time with a bunch of them. And then at the table, I got to have hands on time with them, including the Speakeasy watch, which I tried to take a photo of, and Ken almost tackled me out of the booth at our meetup.
Yeah.
But really just a cool watch and like super, super unique for a very fair price point.
So we won't talk about the specifics of the Speakeasy watch.
Right.
Let's talk about the concept behind it, because I really like this as someone who's sort of like, maybe like a little bit allergic to social media at times, and like kind of just like skeptical of the whole idea of like sharing every facet of your public life on Instagram and everywhere else. I really like the idea of a watch that's like meant to be kind of like a private thing. And that's what this watch is. It's a watch that he is making to order, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And he's asking people not to like talk about the specific design elements or take photos of it and share it. And I don't know, I find that refreshing in a environment where let's just say my inbox is just like overloaded with like press releases from brands, just,
Yeah.
begging us to, talk about their watches publicly. I really like the idea of a brand that's, kind of like trying to cultivate a really dedicated, like kind of like following a group of enthusiasts around it by doing the opposite. I think that's a really interesting idea.
It's infuriating in the best possible way. I am someone on the opposite where most of my job is to share everything that we do with people. If we're at meetups, I'm the one on the corner taking pictures of the meetups and all that kind of stuff. So I very much like kind of grew up in the age of put everything on the internet. It wasn't until a younger generation after me where they realized that wasn't the best idea. And so it's really crazy to have this company in a modern age that is like, don't talk about it, don't share photos of it, don't even look at it. It's this private thing for a private group of people. But it makes you want it more. It makes you just like desire the thing a little bit more. It makes you lust after it because it's that thing that you can't have.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it's an interesting bit of kind of like, anti-marketing almost.
Yeah.
And the watch itself is cool. I think like if you're into Arken's whole vibe and if you like enjoy his stuff at all, I think you'd like the Speakeasy watch. I think it's a cool thing. So,
yeah.
All right. I'm trying to think of what I want to talk about next. I think so. There's two more watches that I really want to talk about. One of them is a watch that we both like that you selected. That I'm going to take a chance to just kind of like talk about on the mic here. You can talk about it too, but I want to talk about the Fierce Brunswick Jump Hour Edwardian edition, which is just a really beautiful watch. This is one of the last watches I got a chance to see during the day because Fierce's booth was mobbed. Pretty much the entire time we were there the whole day. And this is a silver case with a beautiful. It's an enamel dial or porcelain dial. It's a beautiful white dial.
It's a lacquered dial, but it has the appearance of like a porcelain kind of effect, especially with the silver around it.
Yeah, it's really, really beautiful, very classic. Feels very English to me, and kind of like an old fashioned sort of way. I think the typeface is doing a lot of the work there. This is a custom typeface just for this watch, I believe. And I like a silver watch. I own one silver watch. I think it's a cool metal for a watch case. It's very, very beautifully polished. And I love the jump hour complication. They did a fantastic job with this watch, and I believe they did sell out like towards the very end of the day. I think they sold their last one like literally as I was like standing there. I think the last one got sold. Not to me,
man.
Unfortunately, but
heartbreaking.
Yeah. Really, really cool piece. I know you're a fan of this one too.
More than a fan. I love this piece. I love silver. Most of my jewelry, if not all of it, is 925 silver. So I have a connection to the material. I wrote about it in our piece, obviously. So if I'm being completely transparent, this is my watch of the show. This is the watch that really just stole my attention and held on to it. And really the one that I wish I could have walked away with. And it's just this perfect clash of like this bright, vibrant red strap with this really kind of creamy white dial and beautifully finished silver case. It just, I don't know. It's really hard to explain it, but it's classically Fierce in an elevated way. They're very good at refined excellence. And this, I feel like it just takes it to another level. And it feels in the hand like something just so incredibly special and such a cool piece from the brand. And I'm bummed that it's only 10. Only a run of 10. I wish that there were 100, because if there were, then that means I might have a chance at snagging one.
Yeah, it's really good. They've done a silver piece each of the last 2 years at British Watchmakers Day. So, I think that's maybe will become a tradition. So, maybe next year you'll have a crack at a silver Fierce that maybe you'll like even more. Who knows?
You never know. I mean, the Brunswick case, though, I think just suits the vibe of it so beautifully well. And to put the jump hour in there too, they pulled out all the tricks on this piece. So I don't know, when you look at it and you're like, how are they going to top it next? I have no idea. I don't know if they can, for me personally, because this watch is just incredible.
Yeah, it's very good.
Yeah.
The other piece I wanted to talk about is another watch that we wrote about in our write up, but I'm gonna double up here in the podcast. And that's the the new watch from Appiar.
Yeah.
It's the Gen 1B, I believe, is what they call it. This is a completely 3D printed titanium case and dial
And
watch.
strap.
And strap too, yeah.
Yeah.
So really interesting brand. They really take pains to do as much in the UK as possible, as much of the manufacturing in the UK as possible, and they have like a lot of documentation as to like, where everything sort of like comes from, on their Gen 1 and their other. I believe they have one other watch that they've released. So very interesting young brand with a lot of really cool ideas. The thing I appreciated about speaking with Appiar is that they had a prototype of the new Gen 1 for British Watchmakers Day on their table, and they were like very upfront with the fact that like it's a prototype and it's kind of rough and like it's not what the final version is going to look like. And I think that like I just really like that transparency. Like it's something that like is very rare, I think, from brands. And so they had this prototype, which was cool enough. Like it definitely like, it looks like a 3D printed case and dial in that it has a sort of like rough finishing that you would expect. But it of course doesn't match like, like the renders that you see like, on their website and in their press materials. But they did have a newer version of the dial that they were showing separately that they just hadn't like put into a watch yet. It's like dramatically better than the dial in their in the prototype that they were exhibiting. So this is a brand that's sort of like figuring it out, I think, as they go a little bit. Like they're doing things that are other brands have done 3D printing, but like it's still like there's a learning curve, I think, industry wide with this technology. And no one has really quite cracked it yet. And they're very ambitious, and they have like this very intricate dial and case design, which is the whole point of doing 3D printing. Why do it if you can, do these designs through like traditional methods? The whole point is like showing us like, case lines and curves that you couldn't get through like traditional milling methods. So just a really wild watch, very ambitious. I think they're going to get there. I think they're going to figure it out. I'm very excited to see a finished product once one is available. So just wanted to like make sure to give them a shout out because I think they're doing really, really interesting stuff.
Yeah, very cool. It's the best way I can describe it is it felt like a watch that was crafted out of spider web, which is kind of like a strange way to go about it. But obviously they're going with that. The dial pattern is very reminiscent of a spider web. But yeah, walking up and talking to him, I kind of said the same thing I said to Schofield. I'm like, okay, why this watch? What was the inspiration behind it? And he just was like, why not? We have the material, we have the capabilities, we have the technology. Like, just go for it and see what we can do. And it was just cool. It was cool to kind of, I think you and I both get inundated with people who talk about the prestige of their brand and the history of their brand. And, they're special because they were around first. And with this brand here, it's like, well, no, we're using modern technology. We're a modern brand. We don't have history to rely upon. We're looking at the future, not the past. And that was just a cool kind of refreshing take on a classic watch.
Yeah, I agree. Really excited to see kind of like what they come up with next and how they continue to refine this watch specifically.
Yeah.
Any other watches you wanted to call out before we get to the talking about all the fried chicken we consumed?
I'm going to give you one booth that was really great, but unfortunately I didn't go hands-on with their watch, and that was Great British Watch Company. Very cool kind of historic pieces, but unfortunately their booth was really like neat from a history perspective, but really not a hands-on watch display booth. So I didn't get to engage with the product as much, and I had to put my time elsewhere. But a story that I want to dive into a little bit more and hopefully hear more from that brand. But the watch I want to talk about here is from our pal Georgie over at Bamford.
Sure.
The D300 Diver Ceramic. What a cool watch.
I left that off my list because it wasn't a British Watchmakers Day limited edition.
Yeah.
But that was probably like maybe like my favorite thing that I like tried on.
For me, that was the surprise of the show. I mean, I really like Bamford. I like what they do. I talked to you about how the old Bamford Octavia done in a purple and black color scheme was one that I actually wanted in my collection for a while. But I think Bamford is a company that people don't necessarily look at as like a watchmaking company. They look at them as a customization company. But here, this is a genuine attempt at watchmaking, at unique watchmaking. You know, we have these really interesting divers that are, again, very modern in construction with ceramic, and they fit really well. They look really nice. Just a really cool, surprising piece. And it was the first table I went to, and I tried on a couple of them. It was the first photo I took. It's the first photo I posted. Just a watch that really captured my attention immediately right out of the gate.
Yeah, really, I was very impressed with it as well. They did a really nice job with that, which, you know, shouldn't be surprising. Like they do a nice job, you know, consistently. But it's a pretty original design for a dive watch, and the colors are great. I was partial to the white one personally. Yeah. But I think you can make a case for all of them. Yeah, really, really good stuff. I just want to like make sure we shout out a couple of other things we did and thank some people. I want to thank Andrew Cantor, who's a contributor to Worn and Wound, who writes about historical, mostly British horology. We'll link to his work in the show notes. But he was kind enough to give us a tour of the historical horology exhibit at the Science Museum in London, which I found to be like really valuable and worthwhile, and just kind of like interesting to see. Like, obviously he gets a lot of his, you know, like concepts for the written pieces like from the archives of this museum, which has a great kind of like collection of historical watches and clocks, and it's just like a real treasure trove of information. So so that was a really great experience.
Best time I've ever had in a museum, period. That was awesome.
Yeah. Hey, you sound like a museum skeptic, maybe. I love museums.
I do too, but I like them when you see dinosaurs.
Yeah. Fair enough. I think that was on a different floor. I also want to thank the team at Christopher Ward for hosting me at their Maidenhead facilities. Devin, you missed that because you had some like an all-time travel snafu and did not get into London on time for that, but you would have really liked it.
I would have loved it. It would have been the best time at a manufacturer I've ever had.
Probably, yeah. They were very kind and welcoming, and we saw a lot of cool stuff. And I want to particularly thank Mike France for taking a significant chunk of his afternoon and chatting with me about his facilities there and everything going on with Christopher Ward. And then, Devin, what else did we do in London? It was
we rode the tube.
Yeah, we rode the tube. Yeah, tube was great.
Yeah, not full of urine, which is a nice change of pace for me as a New York living person now. I can't call myself a New Yorker. Zach Weiss would kill me. Yeah, we did a lot of really, really cool things. I just want to give a shout out to everyone who was there. Just like a nice warm thank you. When we are traveling to other places, especially for work too, it can be kind of isolating. And London, this is the first time I've ever traveled to London. And so when you're in a new area, in a new time zone, it's really easy to kind of feel like, okay, you do the thing, you go back to your hotel room and you just kind of hunker down. You're there by yourself. You can't wait to go home and see your loved ones again. Everyone was just so welcoming. It was like walking into a room of a bunch of friends. Everyone was so happy to have us there. We were happy to meet everybody. So many people just complimented the work that we do, and it was really rewarding. It just felt like we made a bunch of new friends at this show and didn't have a room full of strangers. We had a room full of people who we've been talking to through our Slack Plus community, through the podcast, through our editorial. And so just thank you to all of you for making us feel welcome. Thanks for coming out and supporting us. Thanks for letting us host you. Ken, thanks for bringing a bottle of whiskey that made us all a whole lot more friendly.
Yeah.
But sure. From the bottom of my heart, thank you to all of you guys out there.
Yeah, it was a great trip. It was great to be so warmly received. And like I said, I think we'll be back in some capacity next year. So stay tuned for that. We'll make our triumphant return to the UK. We also ate a lot of fried food. That's what you do. In the UK. So it was a good time had by all, I think.
A lot of brown food, a lot of great gin and tonics. The one thing that I will put out there too is if you are traveling to one of the Wind Up Watch Fairs, look out for the meetups. Hit us up on our Slack Plus group. Let us be your welcome party, just the same way you were our welcome party. That's why we're all into this hobby. We have friends everywhere. Don't go to the show and go back to your hotel room and be isolated. make it a full weekend experience like we just had, and utilize the tools that we have in our community to do so.
Yeah. Now, there's always a lot of cool things going on kind of like outside of the show itself. So that's a really good tip. Devin, it's cultural recommendation time.
Yeah.
Yeah. What have you got for us this week?
Well, okay. So I've done movies, I've done video games. I was thinking about doing a museum, but that felt kind of odd to do right off the top there. I've been doing a lot of cooking and just like trying to take it easy in the afternoon because of all my travel. And while I'm doing that, I go on YouTube and I put on Top Gear Classic. There is a YouTube channel that is just running old reruns of clips from Top Gear Classic 24/7 all the time. And it's fantastic. One of my favorite shows. It keeps with the British theme of this podcast, which is perfect. And I can just put it on. I can hear the old trio kind of go through their jokes and review old cars and go on their adventures while I'm sitting in the kitchen cooking. And it's just a nice kind of wind down at the end of the night. So go on YouTube, look up Top Gear Classic, and just get lost for hours and hours.
Yeah, Top Gear Classic is a really good recommendation. That's it's great to like. I feel like I've seen like almost every episode of kind of like those prime like years of Top Gear, but it's nice to relive them. It's just such a fun show, and I'm not like a gearhead. I'm not a big car guy, but like you don't need to be at all for that show. So yeah, fantastic. My cultural recommendation this week is a podcast / newsletter by our friends Stephen Pulverant and Justin Haast, who launched about a month ago a new platform called The Enthusiasts. I like to keep up with these with these watch related newsletters and just kind of like dip into them and sample them and see how what they're doing, because I'm just curious about how the watch media landscape is evolving, and it seems like a lot of my favorite writers are kind of like migrating to this newsletter format. And so what Stephen and Justin have done is they've for $10 a month you get a piece of content every week. One week you'll get like a newsletter, which goes into pretty great depth on a particular topic. And then the next week you get a podcast. So it's a newsletter, podcast kind of deal. And if you're familiar with with Stephen's work, at Hodinkee and Hodinkee Radio, I think the podcast will be, quite familiar to you, in that it's quite good. He's good at hosting a podcast. I'm not going to lie. Like I steal a lot of stuff from
Don't admit that.
Steve. I mean, over the years, it just kind of like seeped in, to my head. It's not intentional. But he's just very good at like kind of like, driving a conversation about watches and like kind of getting into why we really are interested in these things. Most recent episode is about I think it'll still be the most recent episode by the time this airs, but it's about the watches that changed their lives, and they each kind of go through like 5 watches that that changed their lives in some way, either personally or professionally. It's just a really interesting topic. Stephen also had like really very nice things to say about Wind Up on the most recent podcast. So that was also very nice to hear. And we look forward to seeing him in San Francisco shortly, is the next one that I believe he'll be at. So yeah, The Enthusiast. It's $10 a month. I think it's well worth it if you're interested in getting some additional watch content sent to you. You don't even have to do anything. It just comes to your inbox, comes to your podcast feed, and
just the way I like it.
Imagine that
for $2.50 per piece of content. That's an incredible value.
Yeah, it kind of is. When you consider the work that goes into a lot of something we don't talk about enough is how this how this all gets paid for. It's that's a much bigger topic for later episode. There's many different ways that can happen, but I'm interested in this model where creators are kind of like doing it independently.
It's so much work.
It is a lot of work.
Much work.
It's a lot of work.
For me, I record the podcast, I put it in the bin and walk away, and Kazan takes it from there. So.
Yeah, and like I don't even do the editing. Like we have a colleague who does the editing, and it's Anyway, that's my recommendation. Yeah, this is a fun episode, Devin. Nice to relive London with you. It was a great trip. Yeah.
Thanks to everyone out there.
We'll do it again, maybe. Who knows?
Can't wait.
Yeah. You'll have to wait because they only do it once a year. So, that's just the way these things
I
go.
need my chicken. Where else am I going to get a fried chicken on my way back to the hotel? Like, that's just...
DM Devin for his fried chicken recommendations. We didn't get to that on the pod, but I think you'll be happy to share all of the
I don't know.
So.
You have to buy a speakeasy first. No social media content. Hot watches, hot chicken, all offline.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Devin, for reliving a fun weekend on the podcast, and thanks to everyone for listening to this episode. We'll be back next week with another new episode of the podcast. Until then, take care. We'll see you next time.